Mount Ijen is usually framed as the world's deadliest job. But the real system here isn't the volcano. It is the economy inside it. Miners haul 70 to 90 kilograms of sulfur through gas that their cloth masks filter at less than 30%. They are paid roughly 25 cents a kilogram to breathe acid. The question isn't why they risk it. It is why the math leaves them no other option. The physical setting of Mount Ijen is defined by extremes that shape every aspect of the work performed here. The crater itself spans nearly 1 kilometer across and plunges 200 meters deep, a collapsed volcanic bowl carved by ancient eruptions. At its base lies a lake so acidic its pH measures around 0.2, registering close to pure sulfuric acid. This body of water is not just inhospitable to life, it actively dissolves metal and stone, etching the crater walls with chemical scars. Above the lake, volcanic vents discharge clouds of sulfur dioxide and other gases, sometimes exceeding 500 parts per million at the rim. These emissions drift and settle depending on wind and temperature, but always define the air miners must breathe. At night, the famous blue fire, sulfur gases combusting at over 200 degrees Celsius, marks the active heart of the system. Access is as much a barrier as the chemistry. The ascent from the base camp at 1,200 meters to the crater rim at 2,800 meters covers a climb of 1,600 vertical meters along a steep 9-kilometer trail. The descent into the crater is even more precarious, with loose ash and slick rock underfoot. Every step into the basin is a step deeper into a space where industrial extraction and environmental volatility are inseparable. Human labor here is embedded directly into the architecture of the volcano, a workflow designed around the logic of exposure, endurance, and extraction inside a living, hazardous landscape. Sulfur dioxide is the defining hazard in the crater, yet it remains invisible to the eye. Concentrations at ground level often reach several hundred parts per million, routinely surpassing the World Health Organization's 24-hour guideline of 20 parts per million. During periods of atmospheric inversion, the gas can accumulate to levels that provoke immediate physiological reactions. Inhalation triggers coughing, a tightening of the chest, and bronchospasm within minutes. Medical surveys of Ijen miners report that more than 70% experience chronic respiratory symptoms, with spirometry showing significant reductions in lung function compared to local controls. The risk is not limited to acute events. Repeated exposure erodes forced vital capacity over years, driving up rates of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and asthma-like conditions. The tools available to mitigate this exposure are limited. Most miners rely on simple cloth masks or improvised filter respirators, which laboratory tests show filter out less than 30% of airborne sulfur dioxide. Field measurements using paired samplers inside and outside these masks reveal only a marginal reduction in inhaled gas, typically 10 to 20% lower than ambient levels. The cost of a basic mask, around $2 to $3, represents a significant fraction of a miner's daily earnings, yet offers little in the way of true protection. High-grade respirators with effective acid gas filtration are rare, expensive, and often shared or reused well past their functional lifespan. In this environment, time spent inside the plume is not just a physical ordeal, it is a quantifiable health cost. Each minute of exposure is a trade-off, calculated against the need to meet a daily quota. The arithmetic of risk is built into the workflow. The longer a worker stays in the toxic air, the more sulfur can be extracted and the higher the wage. But the bodily toll accumulates, often imperceptibly, until respiratory capacity is lost for good. Arifan begins his shift before dawn, joining dozens of others at the crater rim. The routine is unvaried but physically exacting. Each trip starts with a descent into the basin, where sulfur vapor condenses into solid crust along the vent's edge. Using a metal rod and hammer, Arifan chips away brittle yellow slabs, each weighing several kilograms. The extracted chunks are stacked into paired bamboo baskets, balanced across his shoulders. By the time both baskets are filled, the combined load reaches from 70 to 90 kilograms, nearly matching his own body weight. Once loaded, he starts the ascent. The climb from the crater floor to the rim is steep and uneven, with loose ash underfoot and acidic mist in the air. Every step is calculated to conserve energy and maintain balance, since a single slip could result in injury or lost income. Arifan repeats this cycle 3 to 5 times per shift. Over the course of a day, he will move close to 300 kilograms of sulfur out of the crater, each kilogram representing a unit of exposure, both to toxic gas and to the cumulative strain of lifting and carrying. The number of trips and the total mass moved are not just measures of output, but direct variables in the equation that converts physical risk into cash. Exposure time and kilograms carried are inseparable in this system, and together they define both the day's earnings and the body's incremental loss of health capital. Payment at Mount Ijen is calculated by the kilogram, with rates fluctuating between 25 and 30 US cents for each kilogram of sulfur. For miners, the arithmetic is immediate. Each basket weighing 70 to 90 kilograms translates directly to cash in hand at the end of the shift. A standard day's output, about 300 kilograms, yields between 15 and 25 US dollars, depending on the negotiated rate that day. There are no weekly pay cycles or deferred accounts. Cash changes hands as soon as the sulfur is weighed and recorded. This liquidity shapes behavior. Every additional trip, every extra kilogram carried, is a direct boost to daily income. The incentive structure leaves little margin for rest or delay, since any time not spent hauling sulfur is time not earning, and the day's wage is only as high as the total weight delivered. A single misstep or acute illness can erase weeks of earnings. Without formal insurance, a miner sidelined for 2 weeks by a respiratory infection or injury loses between 150 and 350 US dollars, an amount that can force a household into food insecurity or debt. Over a typical mining career, the cumulative health burden is measured as a loss of 2.5 disability-adjusted life years, reflecting years lost to chronic disease or impairment. Healthcare is not close at hand. The nearest Puskesmas clinic sits 15 kilometers from the crater, accessible only by motorbike. Delays in treatment compound the risk, and each day away from the mine is a day without income. The entire system balances on a fragile ledger where even minor disruptions can have lasting economic and physical consequences. Risk at Mount Ijen is not simply endured. It is learned and normalized over years, often beginning in adolescence. Many miners enter the trade as apprentices between the ages of 12 and 14, typically alongside fathers or older relatives. This early initiation is not just a matter of skill transfer. It is a process of habituation, where exposure to sulfur fumes, persistent coughing, and eye irritation become accepted features of daily life. Within the Arifan family, as in many others, the expectation is clear. Symptoms such as shortness of breath or chronic fatigue are treated as routine, not as signals to stop. The job's hazards are woven into family tradition, making mining a default path when other options are scarce. Over time, the line between risk and routine blurs, and the predictability of daily earnings, however hard-won, takes precedence over the uncertain promise of safer but less reliable work elsewhere. In the districts around Mount Ijen, options for stable employment are sharply limited. Seasonal agriculture provides only intermittent income, with planting and harvest cycles that leave long gaps between paydays. For many households, the sulfur mine is the only source of daily cash flow, an advantage that outweighs even the most visible health risks. The cost of traveling to Banyuwangi or other urban centers for work often exceeds a miner's entire day's wage, making migration an unaffordable gamble. Without formal contracts, miners are excluded from the BPJS National Worker Insurance Scheme, leaving them outside the social safety net. the system's logic is reinforced by immediate liquidity needs. School fees, food, and debt repayment cannot wait for the slow turn of the agricultural calendar or the uncertainty of distant job markets. In this context, the predictability of mining income, however hazardous, becomes a rational anchor in a landscape defined by scarcity and constraint. Patterns at Mount Ijen are not unique. Across the world, high-risk informal sectors operate on the same basic equation: immediate cash in exchange for exposure to significant hazard, with little or no protection. In artisanal gold mining from Indonesia to Peru, workers handle mercury vapor and fine dust, often with only cloth masks that barely reduce inhaled toxins. Shipbreaking yards in Bangladesh and India see laborers dismantling steel hulls without effective respiratory gear, facing heavy metal fumes and the constant risk of crushing injuries. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, informal cobalt miners, including children, dig through dust and ore with bare hands and no respiratory protection, earning just a few dollars per kilogram. E-waste processing sites in Ghana and Nigeria expose workers to acid burns and toxic fumes, with gloves as the only line of defense. In each of these sectors, safety equipment is minimal, formal insurance is absent, and pay is delivered in cash at the end of each shift. The hazard cash protection triad repeats, structured by the same underlying scarcity and the same logic of constrained choice. Viewed through an optimization lens, the sulfur mine operates as a system where workers balance immediate income against future health loss, constrained by limited alternatives. The risk-income equation can be shifted by concrete interventions, subsidizing high-efficiency respirators to reduce toxic exposure, providing microcredit schemes that lessen dependence on daily cash, or establishing on-site clinics to lower the cost of illness. Each lever, safer gear, accessible healthcare, or alternative livelihoods, expands the set of feasible choices, allowing miners to earn without absorbing the full health cost. The system's structure, not the volcano, determines how risk is calculated and endured. The crater's hazards are fixed, but the market around it remains dynamic and unforgiving. Here, risk is not recklessness, but a constrained calculation shaped by absent protections and narrow alternatives. As global demand for sulfur persists, the system endures. The real volatility is not geological, it is economic. Share your perspective below.